So let's talk about symmetries, and we're going to first we're going to understand the concept, and then the focus, of course, is to apply that concept to creating music. First of all, I'm going to be as concise as possible in the video, so I'm not going to delve into much abstract details. However, I think that of course it comes with with a price that you will not be as able to understand and consequently to use this concept just by watching this video. Therefore, I strongly recommend that you go to the article I will be linking in the video description. There you will have all the details about it, and I encourage you to to study it, to think about it, and evolve from there. Evolve your own approach. So let's start with the concept. What is a symmetry? A symmetry. I want to give you the definition by Frederick Goodman, which is a mathematician. He has a book. I'll be linking. You will find the link to his book on the article, on my article, and I think it's very interesting to start with the way he defines it. He defines it. Of course, in mathematics, this definition can have different instantiations, but he starts with a definition that is he defines symmetry as an undetectable motion. Something which I think is important to understand. An undetectable motion. This means that there are two components to the concept, to this definition. On one hand, you have this motion. We can call it an action or a transformation that takes place. And on the other hand, you have something else which is left unchanged by this action or transformation. So there are always these two components to the concept of a symmetry. But the symmetry itself is that action or transformation. And because it is undetected, what does it mean? Undetectable motion in this context is a motion that left something invariant to it. That is, you cannot tell that anything happened just by looking at the end result. Basically, that's what it means. So a symmetry is something that is an event that happens, which you cannot tell it happened just by looking at the end result. An example, obvious example of a symmetry is actually I can give you right now. You can example of a symmetry is this. This is an object. But consider it's a 3D object. But let's consider this is a square, okay, in the 2D plane for the purpose that we want. A symmetry. If I have this object here and I go and do this, it's nothing changed. You can tell that anything changed. Well, assuming of course this is a perfect square. No, the edges, the vertices are not labeled, and so on. So everything is undistinguished here. So nothing changed. You cannot tell that I'm doing anything with this motion. This motion, which is the rotation on the 2D plane through the center of the square by 180 degrees. This specific rotation is a symmetry. But this rotation by 90 degrees is not a symmetry because you can tell that it happened. Okay, something changed. So you see the difference between us. Now you see what the symmetry is. Okay. So this is the definition of a symmetry. Now, what does this have to do with music? Is that I'm going to generalize the definition, this concept of symmetry, to any attribute or property of a system relative to which another property of the same system is invariant. Okay, this is the generalization I'm going to make. What does this mean? We generalize this concept to apply it to this specific context. And what is in the context of a musical piece, a symmetry involves two things. Or let's say this way: we have two different things. They can be objects, or they can be a symmetry, object of a symmetry, or they can act as a symmetry. These two things are a structure and a function. The structure is the actual choice of notes that we use. For example, if I want to do a short music with just three notes, I may choose A, C, and E, for example. You see, I'll choose the three notes. These three notes, A, C, and E, they are the structure. The notes I'm going to use in my creative process. The other component is related with function or an action or transformation. I cannot find a single bad word, so I may use these different words to mention to it. But there are these two components, and this second component is related, of course, with it means relationships between those structural elements, relationships between the notes. If you have a sequence of notes, you can devise different kinds of relationships between them. That's the other thing that we can use in creating the symmetries. So we have the choice of notes. So we'll be looking at two things: on the notes that we choose to use, and on relationships between them. That's basically what we're talking about. And either of these things, or both of them, can be fixed or can be made change. And depending on that, we can do a basic classification of symmetries. And I'm not going to go into that here, but you can read about it on the article. It's a more systematic way to describe it. But the point is, you as the player, in this case piano player, you have these two sets of things to look into: the notes that you choose to use and the relationships between them. That's the basis. So if we recall the definition of symmetry, what you are doing is, if you are the scenario here is you want to create a music, so you are exploring it. Of course, you let's suppose you already have a theme that you want to explore. You will. The approach that I propose here is, remember, another thing that is important to note is that second component, the function, or that has to do with the relationships between notes, is always relative to the notes themselves. Therefore, you can always start your approach by the structure, that is, by the notes, by the choice of notes, and then on that structure, you either create a new structure from scratch, or you evolve from an existing structure that you already created, or you based on something else, using symmetries to then create new structure. This is the approach that I'm talking about when using symmetries. I'm going to show what this means. To give you an example, I can just I can do a simple thing like this. I created this structure of these 5 notes, and the relation. What is invariant here, the component that is invariant here, is the relationship between the notes, because you always have the notes themselves change. Therefore, they are in this approach, and this is very a very different way of looking. If you are familiar with the usual concept or mathematical concept of symmetry, in this case, it's much more flexible. The notion of symmetry, I mean, you identify a symmetry depending on how you look at the things. Here, if you look at these 5 notes, what is invariant here, you have this structure here, these 5 notes. What is invariant here is or at least one thing that is the relationship between these notes. They are always related in the same way, in the sense that these notes, this is the note that always immediately precedes this one, and this one relative to this one. So the relationship, you can devise this relationship between the notes that is the same. That is the invariant attribute in this system. The thing that changes, and therefore the symmetry itself is the actual choice of notes that you use. Okay. But if you did this, then there's no symmetry here because nothing actually changes. So what could change if you had only one note? If you didn't change notes at all, if you had only one note to work, you could still apply the concept of symmetry. But the only choice you would have then, if the note doesn't change, you can only change one other thing, and that would be that would act as the symmetry itself, that motion, which can only be, in this case, it can only be the same note in another octave. For example, this is a C, and this is another C. Okay, so if you do this, the symmetry here is the change in octave. Okay, the note is the same. What changes is the octave. So this is, you should read the article and think about this, because this is actually a structured or systematic approach for creating music. If you think, and I want also to give you this notion that those who are familiar with mathematics already know this, that you can study a system by looking at another system, as long as you can establish a faithful relationship between the two. So the conclusions you arrive by describing, understanding one of the systems also apply to the system that you actually want to know about. Why I'm telling you this? Because this approach, if you look at creating music from the perspective of symmetries, you have the possibility to establish that faithful relationship between musical creation and construction and usage of symmetries. Therefore, talking about, and in general, if you think about it, this is a natural thing, very natural thing to do, because music always implies a structure, and structure always, on the other hand, structure always implies a symmetry. That's why I told you about just some minutes ago, when I told you that we can, since that relationship is between structural elements, you can always look at or start with the structure itself. You can build upon the structure to identify the symmetries that will allow you to develop the structure, create new structure, and so on. So this is the idea that you can, in this context, what I mean is, talking about symmetries is the exact same thing as talking about composing music. And it really doesn't matter. You could say, well, but a composer doesn't think about symmetries. No composer ever did it. But that's why I told you about that way, that approach that we can have. I want to study music composition, but I have another system which I can use, because it has more advantages for me to study this other system, and I can understand the first one as long as I can do a mapping between them. So you can understand this better and at your own pace, looking at the article. But just to give you this idea that the fact that a composer usually doesn't think about symmetries changes nothing. Okay, as long as you can establish this correspondence, I can talk about symmetries, and as long as I can relate that and the conclusions I derive to the actual musical creation activity. Okay, that's what I'm proposed to do in the article, and help you understand that you can do that approach. And here I'm just going to give you basic examples. I already gave you two examples. If you can work with the same note in different octaves, and I gave you already another example, the sequence of simple sequence of notes. Of course, this sequence is the same as using another sequence, such as this one. Okay, it's another example of the same kind of symmetries. So this is just to help you understand the idea behind the examples, and I'm going to illustrate this to you. I'm going to try to create a piece of a part of a music or a melody or whatever using this approach. I'm going to try to describe to you what I'm thinking, because it's not obvious based on what I'm playing, especially if you're not familiar with music. But actually, it's a process. It's simple enough for you to be able to do it, even if you don't know anything about music. And it the most importantly, this tells you about a process that you can use to develop your ability to create music. Okay, and in this sense, what distinguishes let's say Mozart from you, or from me, for that matter, it's not that Mozart is more able, is a better piano player than me, or than you. Is that he he has a more diverse and more complex range of tools that he can use in the work of creating music. But my point is that creation itself is the same. If it is, whether it's you that are doing it, or Mozart, that part is exactly the same. The difference between you and Mozart is that he has more tools at his disposal, and regardless of whether he ever thought about this, you can, because of what I told you before, you can say that the tools that Mozart had that you lack are those symmetries and the understanding of those symmetries. It's because, of course, those composers start very early, so of course it gives them an advantage, because they can spend much time exploring, developing all that range of tools. And actually, if you look, that's actually a way to interpret the difference in the styles of between different composers, and also a way. Symmetries are also a way to understand what changes when you are creating music with a piano or with a violin, for example. You'll see that the patterns in the symmetries depend much on the instrument that you use, and the choices you do along the way is what in the end will determine your style. That's why a composer A has a style, has his own style, and composer B has another style. And you often, if you know a composer well, you often can, if you listen to a music that you never listen, you can often suspect that who the author is by the style he uses. So that style is the choices of the tools that I usually use. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to try composing music. Let's say that you can start with a specific structure. I'm going to, actually before that, I'm going to give an example. A more explicit example, when you start with a structure that you already have. Let's say you have this structure here, A, B, A, C. Okay, you have a structure. Let's start with the structure A, B, A, C, which is this. You see, what what can we you can evolve from here using symmetries, in the sense that you will look at you have this imagine these 6 notes or whatever they are in the timeline. Okay, what can you do about it? Think about what you are going to do is you can establish a relationship. You already have the structure, so what's the other component that you need to work with symmetries? Is the function or the relationship. So we're going to devise relationships between these nodes, these structural elements, to create those symmetries. Okay, and then from there you can extend this structure. I'm going to give an example. If you look at this in this way, actually I'm going to use a different time value for the notes, so you can see the structure relationship. Because one thing is if I do this, another thing is if I do. So let's say I'm kind of grouping the notes with a faster tempo. Okay, so what I can do, and it's pretty obvious, is you see. This is a symmetric structure because you devise the relation. What changes are the notes, the structural elements change, but you devise the relationship between them that is actually invariant against the notes. That's why that's the symmetry here. This is a symmetric structure in that sense. The symmetry in this case is the action or the relationship. You devise this relationship between with the relationship, this is a note that is 2 notes high in the octave. Okay, basically that's what I mean. You devise a relationship in which this last note didn't exist. So you say, okay, I'm going to use this note because you use this note. You start here, and then you added this. You extended the structure to this note here. And why did you do it? Because you devised the relationship between in this structure, such that a relationship that makes these 4 notes in this specific composition is a symmetric structure. That's what you can focus on. This is the symmetry, the approach using symmetries. But this is a basic example. It can get arbitrarily more complex than this, and that is exactly the point. That's how you can create pretty much any kind of music. It could be something like. You see, it's not obvious. How you go from here to it's not very obvious, but there is a structure. There is a relationship between these notes that makes this a symmetric structure. The thing is how you look at it. I'm going to write this example if you want to look at it in more detail in the article. Okay, so you see 2 completely different examples, and you're all limited by your imagination. Now the thing that you develop in time, and that composers develop in time, is this kind of way of seeing things. When you are composing a music, you are creating a structure and using symmetries, both to create new structure, to extend that structure, and to look at the existing structure. That's basically what you do, and what every composer pretty much does. And what you, of course, your experience will allow you to explore a more diverse range of symmetries and symmetric structures, so that you in time you can do much more complicated things. For example, I'm only using one hand, but if I use the two hands, then it's more complex, but the possibilities are even greater. And this goes to the point that I made in the previous video, that it's almost there is an infinite range of possibilities of choices you have. So you only cannot create music pretty much if you don't want to, because otherwise it's like shooting a target with your eyes closed, and the bullet always goes. As long as you point in the general direction of where the target is, the bullet always goes to the middle of the target. It's creating music like that. You only miss it if you point the gun to the opposite side. Otherwise, it's almost impossible not to create a structure. If you see, that's the difference. To music and any other sounds is that the music has a structure. Therefore, it has a symmetry because of that relationship I told you about between structure and symmetries. So so these were two examples. Again, one example was from here you go to another example, a bit more complicated, is okay. This is pretty much it. I'm going to do exactly this. I'm going to try to create a music ad hoc for you to see. I'm kind of more inclined to something more sober. I don't know. So I'm going to focus more on the lower octaves. Let's see. That's pretty much what I did here. It's not a great example, a very musical example. Of course, because I did this pretty much ad hoc. But the point where I want to get is, I did this while doing exactly that thing. I try to focus on a mood, then I choose the basic structure, as I told you before, and then I'm looking at it from the perspective of symmetries. I'm going to evolve from this structure. But how do I do it? I'm thinking about the symmetries, okay, to develop that structure. That's basically what I just did here. And you can create a complete music piece by doing kind of snippets such as this one, and then you can also use symmetries to connect those different parts, okay. And basically that's the point of this video, to show you this, okay. A final if your goal is to create a piece of music, of course you also want to think about I'm not going to the detail here, but it has to be you will create a structure for sure, but the thing is that the structure as a whole has to have has to be resonant, has to have a unified resonance. The whole structure has to be able to resonate by itself. What I mean by this is in the sense that resonance is a relationship that is constructive, as opposed to a destructive relationship in which the interacting elements conflict with each other. If you have a system of many parts, in this case, a music composed of notes, the relationship between them is such that the whole makes sense in musical terms. It sounds well. Okay? It's a musical piece. So resonance is an identity of a system. So your goal is to do this work, not just to if you want to create music, is to do this work until the whole is resonant. So when you have that harmony between the whole, not just on this part, on that part, but between everything, then you have a piece of music pretty much. And what you can do over time, so we can start with very basic examples like I show you. What you can do over time, like every composer had to do, basically. And if you think about this approach based on symmetries, you can evolve the symmetries that you are able to develop and that you are using. You can work on that over time. Okay. Of course, for more complicated work, you'll need to write things down. So you'll need to know a bit more about music and how to read and write music. But it's worth it because it will allow you to go much far than otherwise. But as you can see, I think this is the goal of this video. I'll told you what the concept of a symmetry is, how you can apply it to create music, okay? And at any level. And so this video actually is primarily intended for people who know nothing about music and they just got a piano on their hands. And this video along with the other two, of course. So I hope you find this interesting. Again, I suggest you read the article and you think about this over time. I think you'll find this useful. So basically, I think I accomplished my goal, which was I gave you a basic idea of what to do with the piano and how to start creating music with it. I hope this is useful, and see you on the next video.